Armageddon Virus. Quarantine exposed how bioterrorism unleashed a weaponized rabies strain that trapped victims inside a Los Angeles apartment building during a catastrophic outbreak. The 2008 American found-footage horror film directed by John Eric Dowdle starred Jennifer Carpenter as television reporter Angela Vidal, who becomes trapped while filming a routine news segment at a fire station. When firefighters respond to a medical emergency at a downtown apartment complex, Angela and her cameraman Scott follow them into what becomes a nightmare scenario. An elderly woman attacks the first responders with superhuman strength, biting a firefighter and spreading a mysterious infection. The Centers for Disease Control immediately seals the entire building with everyone inside, implementing a complete quarantine with no information provided to those trapped. As residents succumb to the infection one by one, survivors discover the horrifying truth in the penthouse apartment. The former tenant was a member of an apocalyptic doomsday cult who broke into a military biological weapons facility and stole the Armageddon virus. This bioweapon was a highly mutated strain of rabies engineered for maximum lethality and transmission speed. The cult member had been conducting unauthorized experiments in his apartment, cultivating the virus with the explicit goal of decimating humanity and bringing about the end of civilization. Evidence found in the attic revealed newspaper clippings about the cult defector and references to the virus having already wiped out a South Pacific island in a previous release. The Armageddon virus spread through saliva and bites, transforming victims into rage-filled, bloodthirsty killers within minutes. The infection granted enhanced strength and aggression while destroying higher brain function, creating technically living zombies driven purely by violence. This demonstrates how extremist ideology, combined with stolen military bioweapons, creates unstoppable outbreaks, with containment efforts often arriving too late to prevent catastrophic loss of life within confined spaces. Rage virus. In 28 days later, well-intentioned animal rights activists accidentally unleashed a devastating plague by freeing infected chimpanzees from a Cambridge laboratory. Cambridge scientists named Clive and Warren had been developing an anger inhibitor to end domestic and urban rage worldwide. They used the Ebola virus as a delivery system for their compound, testing it on chimpanzees. Within 2 weeks, isolated genomes in the Ebola virus reacted to the inhibitor and mutated, creating the opposite effect. Instead of suppressing anger, the virus caused hosts to become filled with constant, uncontrollable rage. Disgusted by what they had created, Clive quit the project and contacted the Animal Freedom Front about the inhumane animal experimentation, but he failed to warn them about the infection. 3 activists broke into the Cambridge Primate Research Center to free the chimps despite a scientist's desperate warnings. One activist freed an infected chimp, which immediately attacked and infected her before being killed. The infected activist then attacked her companions and the scientist, spreading the virus throughout Great Britain. The rage virus had an extremely brief incubation period of 10 to 30 seconds, depending on exposure amount, allowing it to spread exponentially. Within 28 days, mainland Britain was effectively destroyed by the outbreak. This tragedy demonstrates how good intentions combined with ignorance can lead to catastrophic consequences, with activists trying to prevent animal suffering inadvertently causing human suffering on a massive scale. Krippin Virus. I Am Legend depicted Dr. Alice Krippin's genetically engineered cure for cancer, mutating into a virus that transformed humanity into nocturnal monsters called Dark Seekers. In 2009, Dr. Krippin genetically modified the measles virus to cure cancer by reprogramming it to attack cancer cells rather than healthy tissue. The treatment initially appeared successful, curing over 10,000 cancer patients. However, the virus unexpectedly mutated from a contact-borne strain to an airborne pathogen. 90% of infected humans died from the virus immediately. 9% transformed into dark seekers, pale-skinned nocturnal creatures with enhanced strength and speed, but limited intelligence. Only 1% of the global population, approximately 12 million people, were immune to the infection. The Darkseekers proved extremely sensitive to UV light, forcing them to hide during daytime hours. By 2012, 3 years after the outbreak, U.S. Army virologist Robert Neville became one of the few survivors in deserted Manhattan, desperately searching for a cure. The Krippin virus represents one of cinema's most devastating examples of medical hubris, where humanity's greatest medical achievement became its extinction event. Dr. Krippin's breakthrough that should have saved millions instead destroyed billions, exploring the dark side of genetic engineering and the dangers of unintended consequences in scientific advancement. Trioxin Chemical. Return of the Living Dead introduced trioxin, a military herbicide that accidentally reanimated the dead and created unkillable zombies who famously crave brains. 2,4,5-trioxin was originally developed by the Darrow Chemical Company for the U.S. Army as a gaseous herbicide to destroy marijuana plants. The Army discovered an unexpected side effect when the gas restored function to the nervous systems of cadavers, dismembered body parts, and even dead animals and insects. According to the film's lore, trioxin spilled in 1969 at a Pittsburgh VA hospital morgue, causing cadavers to reanimate in what allegedly inspired Night of the Living Dead. The 1985 film is set at the Unita Medical Supply Warehouse in Louisville, Kentucky. Foreman Frank shows new employee Freddie sealed drums containing trioxin and corpses from the original incident. A light tap on a deteriorated canister releases the gas, poisoning Frank and Freddie while reanimating a corpse nicknamed Tarman. Their attempt to cremate the reanimated cadaver releases trioxin into the atmosphere via smoke. Contaminated rain falls on nearby Resurrection Cemetery, reanimating all buried corpses. These zombies are intelligent enough to speak, use tools, and famously call for more brains to ease the pain of their decomposition. Unlike typical zombies, they cannot be killed by destroying the brain, only through incineration or electrocution. The military's solution of a nuclear strike on Louisville only spreads trioxin further through atmospheric distribution, demonstrating cascading failures where attempted solutions make the problem exponentially worse. Trixie Weapon. The Crazies features Trixie, a rhabdoviridae prototype bioweapon that turned a small town's residents into calculating, homicidal maniacs while retaining their intelligence. The 2010 remake, directed by Breck Eisner, is set in Ogden Marsh, Iowa, where a military cargo plane carrying the biological weapon codenamed Trixie crashed near the town. Trixie is specified as a rhabdoviridae prototype, the same virus family that includes rabies, designed to destabilize populations. The plane crashed into the local water supply, contaminating the drinking water consumed by residents. Unlike traditional zombies, the infected retain remarkable intelligence and can use weapons, drive vehicles, and set elaborate traps for the uninfected. The infected become violently homicidal toward healthy people, but can coordinate and work together with other infected individuals. The virus has a 48-hour incubation period from exposure to full transformation. The military imposed a brutal quarantine, shooting anyone attempting to escape the containment zone. Government forces proved more concerned with containment than finding a cure, even executing uninfected civilians to prevent potential spread. The film ends with a nuclear strike on Ogden Marsh, but satellite imagery reveals the infection has already spread to the larger city of Cedar Rapids. This demonstrates how military bioweapons development can have catastrophic unintended consequences when accidents occur, and how government responses prioritizing containment over human life often fail to actually contain the threat while causing additional suffering. World War Z. World War Z depicted a global zombie pandemic with deliberately ambiguous origins, though the source novel suggests it began with Chinese biological warfare experiments gone catastrophically wrong. The 2013 film, directed by Mark Forster, starred Brad Pitt as former UN investigator Jerry Lane, but left the virus origin intentionally unclear. Max Brooks' original 2006 novel theorized the pandemic began when the People's Republic of China continued biological warfare experiments captured from Imperial Japan after World War II. The novel set the first infection in Dachang Village, Chongqing, China, possibly linked to Three Gorges Dam construction, displacing contaminated materials. The film removed all China references after studio concerns about alienating the Chinese market and losing substantial box office revenue. In the film version, the virus spreads through bites with an approximately 12-second infection time, creating fast-moving infected that swarm like insects. The zombies prove attracted only to healthy humans, completely ignoring terminally ill or already infected individuals. This behavior leads to the discovery of a camouflage solution, where healthy people inject themselves with deadly but curable pathogens to avoid detection. This represents Hollywood's economic self-censorship, where original storytelling about Chinese bioweapon research was obscured to protect international profits, demonstrating how commercial considerations can override narrative integrity in modern filmmaking. By the way, if you're enjoying this type of content, I make videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help me out. DC2 Bioweapon. Planet Terror presented a military bioweapon transaction gone wrong, releasing an experimental poison gas that turned a Texas town into a zombie-infested war zone. The 2007 film, directed by Robert Rodriguez, depicted a business deal between demented Lieutenant Muldoon and chemical engineer Abby for mass quantities of a deadly biochemical agent known as DC2, codenamed Project Terror. When the military transaction goes awry, the damaged containers leak DC2 gas at high pressure, painfully and grotesquely grotesquely melting away the faces of men exposed at point blank to the substance. The gas transforms unsuspecting civilians into bloodthirsty zombies with enhanced aggression and strength. Go-go dancer Cherry Darling, her expert gunman ex-boyfriend El Rey, and a group of survivors must fight their way through hordes of infected while also contending with Muldoon's rogue military unit. Cherry loses her leg to a zombie attack, but later receives a prosthetic machine gun attachment, becoming a formidable warrior against the undead. The infection spreads rapidly throughout the rural Texas community, overwhelming all attempts at containment. In the epilogue, Cherry leads survivors to a Caribbean beach at Tulum, Mexico, where they establish a new society amid a worldwide zombie infection, revealing the outbreak has gone global. This demonstrates how military bioweapon programs create threats that cannot be controlled once released, with catastrophic consequences extending far beyond the initial accident site. Biotech Leak. Train to Busan showed how a South Korean biotech company's failed experiment unleashed a mutagenic virus that destroyed an entire nation within days. The 2016 film opens with a truck driver being informed that roads are closed due to a chemical leak at a biotech facility. The driver witnesses a deer, previously struck down by his vehicle, reanimate as a zombie, confirming the virus has begun infecting wildlife. The unnamed bioengineered virus resulted from contamination of the natural water supply, spreading first to animals before jumping to humans. Fund manager Suk Woo later learns through a phone call that his investment company was indirectly responsible for the outbreak, having saved the biotech firm from bankruptcy. The virus spreads with terrifying speed through Seoul and throughout South Korea, with infection occurring within minutes of being bitten. The closer the bite is to the head, the faster the transformation occurs. The infected become hyper-aggressive and fast-moving, forming massive hordes that swarm and trample over each other to reach uninfected victims. The Korean military establishes evacuation centers in Daejeon and Busan, but Daejeon falls within hours due to its proximity to Seoul. Within one day, the South Korean government loses all control and collapses after major cities are overrun. The United States, NATO, and the United Nations contain the outbreak by quarantining the entirety of South Korea, leaving the peninsula a zombie-filled wasteland. This represents how corporate negligence and financial decisions can enable catastrophic biological disasters. Vatican Experiments. REC revealed how a Vatican priest's experiments attempting to cure demonic possession using science accidentally created a viral plague that spread through a Barcelona apartment building. The 2007 Spanish found footage film, directed by Jaume Balaguero and Paco Plaza, follows television reporter Angela and her cameraman as they become trapped inside a quarantined apartment complex. The outbreak begins when an infected dog bites residents in the building, prompting health authorities to seal everyone inside with no escape. Investigation reveals the infection traced to a penthouse apartment housing a young girl named Tristana. The penthouse owner works for the Vatican and was tasked with experimenting on the demonically possessed girl. During his experiments attempting to isolate a biological cause of possession, the enzyme inside Tristana's body mutated into a contagious pathogen. Rather than finding a cure, the priest accidentally created a virus that spread possession-like symptoms through blood and bites. The infected exhibit superhuman strength and extreme aggression, attacking with ferocious violence. The Vatican worker sealed Tristana inside his penthouse, but the mutated enzyme spread through the apartment complex's ventilation and water systems, infecting inhabitants throughout the building. The confined, single-building setting makes this outbreak unique, with the apartment complex becoming the entire world for those trapped inside. This represents the dangerous intersection of religious faith and scientific experimentation, where attempting to rationalize the supernatural through biology created a biological weapon that combined the worst aspects of both. Experimental surgery. Rabid showcased how experimental plastic surgery created a parasitic mutation that turned its victim into a blood-feeding carrier of a rabies-like plague. The 1977 Canadian body horror film, directed by David Cronenberg, starred Marilyn Chambers as Rose, a woman severely injured in a motorcycle accident in rural Quebec. Taken to the Keloid Clinic for plastic surgery, Dr. Dan Keloid performed an experimental procedure using morphogenetically neutral grafts to replace her damaged skin and organs. These grafts were designed to allow tissue to re-differentiate and develop into whatever type of tissue was needed. Rose remained in a coma for a month before awakening with an unexpected mutation. The experimental surgery caused tissue under her armpit to develop into a new orifice containing a phallic stinger she used to feed on human blood. Those she attacked did not die immediately, but instead developed a mutated strain of rabies that rendered them into violent zombie-like creatures with pale skin, yellow discoloration around their eyes, and green foam spitting from their mouths. Unlike traditional zombies, these infected individuals could run, jump long distances, and exhibited superhuman strength while retaining enough intelligence to use crude tools. The infection spread from the rural countryside into downtown Montreal, as Rose unknowingly infected victim after victim to satisfy her blood cravings. The government declared martial law and instituted mass vaccinations, but containment efforts failed as the epidemic spiraled out of control. This demonstrates how experimental medical procedures without proper safety protocols can trigger unforeseen biological mutations with catastrophic public health consequences. Wildfire Bioweapon. Day of the Dead depicted a government bioweapon project that mutated beyond control, transforming infected individuals into super-fast zombies with enhanced physical abilities. The 2008 remake, directed by Steve Miner, takes place in Leadville, Colorado, where military roadblocks seal off the town for what residents believe is a routine quarantine exercise. The outbreak began as Project Wildfire, a classified government experiment directed by Dr. Engel to create a bioweapon that could temporarily paralyze enemy combatants by shutting down their nervous system, allowing for peaceful defeat without casualties. However, the virus mutated during development, and when it escaped containment, it transformed infected individuals into aggressive creatures driven by insatiable bloodlust, rather than rendering them harmless. Unlike traditional slow-moving zombies, the wildfire infected could run at superhuman speeds, jump extraordinary distances, and crawl along walls and ceilings using enhanced strength and agility. When infected, victims first developed flu-like symptoms before becoming catatonic as the virus overwhelmed their bodies. Upon reanimation, they gained numerous open sores on their faces and displayed pale skin with distinctive markings. The infected spread the virus through bites and scratches, with an extremely rapid infection rate. Survivors discovered the infected had an unexpected vulnerability to fire, disintegrating instantly upon contact with flames. The military response proved brutal and ineffective, with soldiers shooting civilians attempting to flee the quarantine zone. This represents how military bioweapon research, prioritizing offensive capability over containment safeguards, inevitably leads to uncontrollable outbreaks when experimental pathogens escape laboratory settings. Carrier reinfection. 28 weeks later showed how human error and poor decisions during repopulation efforts caused a second devastating outbreak of the rage virus in Britain. The 2007 sequel takes place 6 months after the original rage virus outbreak, with the US Army helping to secure a small area of London for survivors to repopulate and restart society. Officials discover an asymptomatic carrier of the virus, a woman who carries the infection without displaying symptoms, except for partial reddening of the left eye. Her husband Don arrives in her isolation cell and kisses her despite quarantine protocols, resulting in his immediate infection. This single breach of containment spirals into another full-scale zombie outbreak that destroys the repopulation effort. The fact that this occurred demonstrates catastrophic failures at multiple levels of the containment operation. Security protocols were inadequate, with insufficient guards posted outside the carrier's room to prevent exactly this type of incident. The military's response to the new outbreak proves even more brutal than the original containment efforts, shooting civilians indiscriminately in failed attempts to stop the spread. By the film's end, the infection has broken free of the British quarantine and spread to continental Europe, with infected individuals seen in Paris and other major cities. This demonstrates how human-caused outbreaks can recur even after apparent containment when proper protocols are not followed, and how the human element of emotion and poor judgment can undermine even the most sophisticated containment systems. If this was worth your time, subscribe so you never miss new content. Thanks for watching.